Hi, Matt Bisogno here again. It's sunny outside, isn't it? Marvellous. Longer days now as well. The spring has finally sprung, and that means we've got lots of racing. We've got afternoon and evening cards now. 5 and 6 meetings a day is just about the norm, and that means kind of 35 to 50 races a day. The consequence of that is that we need to be a lot more careful and selective with the races we choose to play in. So the purpose of this week's Gold Nuggets is to look at the process of race selection and how GG's facilitates that for me and for you. So a while ago, November 2020 it was, so about a year and a half ago, I produced a short series of articles and videos, supporting videos, called The Price is Wrong. And the whole crux of this series, mini-series, was that in order to win at betting, we need to find the horses that are the wrong prices. And there are 3 elements in this process. The first is race selection. The second one is then some form analysis. And the third one is choosing the right bet type on that selection. So I will link to that previous series, which I think is a really good thing to look at, whether you've looked at it before or not, either as a refresher or as a new bit of content to you. It's evergreen content. Definitely have a look at that. In this video, I'm just going to kind of refresh, if you like, the race selection component. Firstly, to make it directly current now, and secondly, as a consequence of that or related to that, to show how a couple of things on GG's have changed which actually support you in your 3-part challenge work, certainly in the race selection component. So that's a lot of fluff. Let me actually evidence what I'm talking about. This is the intro blurb about the challenge in 3 parts, and as I say here, part 1, which is race selection. If you choose the right races, you're choosing the right battles, and if you choose your battles, you've got a chance to come out in front. As I say here, choosing the right races means giving ourselves the best chance of finding an edge. Race selection is at the bottom of the pyramid of edges, and if appropriate thought is given at this stage, prospects at every other turn further up are amplified. But which are the right races? Well, this depends on you and what and who you know, or in the case of this challenge, what data you have at your disposal. Things to consider might be not too many or too few runners, plenty of form on offer, and those with a setup bias. And then parts 2 and 3 are shortlisting and bet selection, which we will not cover in this video. So let's go to the part 1 section. Now, I suggested in this video that you essentially used some fairly arbitrary filters for race selection, and the video kind of suggests going to the race card page and using the show filters option in the top right corner. Now, you won't see this if you're on mobile, so this is a kind of desktop view only. If I click on show filters, you see I've got these options here, and indeed these have there are more options here than there were at that time. The filters that I want to use, and I'm going to view on the compact so you can see the races. These are all of the races today, and I'm going to select handicaps only. So I'm just going to uncheck the non-handicap button, and you can see that the number of boxes here is diminishing as I make these changes. So I've selected handicaps only. I'm personally going to stay only on flat racing, so I'm going to get rid of hurdle and chase, and obviously there aren't any handicap National Hunt flat races, and I want more than at least 8 runners and no more than 11 or 12, 11 let's say, and I'm left with a short list now of 8 races. So if I do this by time, you can see these are the 8 races. Now, historically, you would have to do a little bit of work going backwards and forwards with these races. But recently we introduced the My Races function, and that's what these little stars are next to the race names, regardless of whether you're on by meeting, and you can see that there, or by time. You can see them on the left hand side, or on the compact view you can see them again on the left hand side. So what I'm going to do is I am going to simply select all of these races, and you can see them as I select them appearing in the top row, which is My Races. So what I can do now, and you can see that they're in sort of race time order, so what I can do now is I can click on the first one, the 140 at Catterick, and I have that race here now. A further facilitation that we've recently added is rather like historically you'd have to go back to the main card page and then select the next race, which is a bit of a bind. So we've just enhanced that slightly now, that when you select a race to be in your My Races, you can see at the top here I've got a bespoke race card essentially with the races that I've starred. So rather than going back to the main menu page and clicking the next one, I can just get them from this drop down here. So I can go to the 430 at Catterick just like this. And that essentially is race selection. If you're doing it from what we might call a top-down approach, in other words, choosing races that have a general profile fit. Now, one of the other things that I would personally do here, and if I just put this by time so that we can see these My Races, there are certain races that I would be more interested in than others. So I wouldn't be interested in 3-year-old handicaps, and I wouldn't necessarily be interested in, well, I certainly wouldn't be interested in 2-year-old handicaps later in the season. They're a bit too inscrutable for me. Lots of people love them, and our very own Sam Darby is a bit of an expert on 3-year-old handicaps and following hot form races and that kind of thing. I've never been able to quite get to grips with them, not being a ratings guy, or having quite the handle that he does on hot form. So I stick to what I know, and that's the races I like are the ones where they've all had a load of runs already. They're all fully exposed, and the one with the best setup of previous form, draw, and pace considerations is generally the bet. If we use this 140 race as an example, it's a 5 furlong handicap at Catterick. It's got 10 runners. It's got quite a nice shape to it. There is a 8 to 11 favourite, so maybe we're betting without the favourite or each way. And again, that's part 3 in the Price is Wrong challenge. That's the bet selection component. So once we've found something that's interesting in the race, something that's bettable in the race, something where the price is wrong, we need to work out how to optimize our play around that price being wrong. So for instance, in this race, and I haven't looked at it, if we thought that Val de Travers looked a very legitimate favourite, but we didn't like the price, well, we can, but there's another one in there that we do quite like. We can bet the other one without the favourite, or we can do it in an exacta over the favourite, so favourite to beat the one we like. There are ways to play it where we don't have to. A lot of people, the default position would be to bet a horse against this odds on each way. But if we really think that the favourite has a strong chance, then we're actually, the balance of probabilities are that we're giving away the win part on the each way bet. So it's not, you know, some days that might be the right way to play if you think the favourite is fair but, you know, beatable. But other days we're just conceding half of our stake, you know, more often than not, straight off the bat. So in this race, I wouldn't necessarily be trying to beat Val de Travers. I'd like to look at, I suspect it might quicken up a bit today. And we can see that certainly on the place component, the favourite, it has a good profile fit. Mockerman has come down their weights a lot, as, mind you, so have quite a few of these, which they've come sufficiently far down the weights to suggest that they are not just out of form, but probably not the horse they once were. Nevertheless, Mokkaman's profile is interesting, and you can see that last summer on quick ground, 2 runs at the track yielded a win and a second. What's interesting about that about the win, was that he was drawn 10 at Catterick, which is often perceived to be a bad draw, but we can see from the draw tab that plenty of high drawn horses do win. For all that, the general advantage is to low, something which is factored heavily into prices, by the way. The real edge at Catterick over 5 furlongs is to those horses who race on the front or prominently, and we can see that from the heat map here. Those that were held up really struggle, held up and high struggle as well, whereas those that are kind of in this front triangle here are the ones to focus on. So with that in mind, we can actually largely overlay that on the heat map on the pace tab, like so. And I've just we haven't got PRB, we need to put PRB in this drop down. At the moment with place is the best one, and we can just see this, again, what I just talked about, this advantage. It's kind of a pace edge rather than a draw edge over 5 on quick ground at Catterick. And we can see that Vale de Travers is going to have to come past horses. Probably not, probably still won't stop him, but he's got a little bit of work to do. Horses that figure to be on or close to the front are likely to be Karat. Alan Britton's out of form at the moment, and Blue Ella, who's quite interesting in the race. I think Blue Ella won the race last year. Has a patchy overall form profile, but as you can see by this, let me just do this, by this line of green on the place in the last 2 years, definitely suited to conditions. Is drawn 10 as the other horse we were just looking at, Mokkaman, was when he won. But Bluella is a horse that leads or races prominently, and so she is, I think it's a she, is 14 to 1 in what's a fairly low grade handicap, and it might be playable at that sort of price. That really, obviously, the purpose of this video is to look at race selection rather than the whole process. But while we're here, I thought Bluella was interesting. She's probably Ben Sanderson is, I think he won on her last year when she won the race, and I'd probably have a small bet on her later on, a very small bet. So that's top down race selection. Now what about bottoms up race selection? I'm just going to remove all of my races there and get back to the normal view. So bottom up is when rather than looking for a race that has a kind of suitable setup, you look for a runner of interest. And to do this, I'm just going to go to I could go to any of the reports. In this case, I'm going to use trainer snippets because it gives me a fair bit to go at. And you might notice that I already have a couple of parameters set up in these boxes at the top. So in these, you can filter the data in the main body of the report by things that are important to you. So I've got a minimum of 10 runs and a percentage rivals beaten of 55% or 0.55 in here. And I think I'm just going to put in, no, I'll leave it like that for a minute and see where we get to. So the race type and distance range are the ones that tend to have the most content in the window. So they're not the most revealing, but some of these other ones are sort of kind of micro angles, if you like. I should also add that trainer snippets is the data in here relates to the last 2 years. So, for example, Gordon Elliott in the last 2 years has moved 274 runners up in distance by this much, either 25% or more on the flat or 20% or more over jumps, and 40 of them have won, and so on, and those are the numbers. There's nothing particularly exciting here. Might have a look at the Ollie Murphy horses there, but probably not. Last time out winners, again, they tend to be very well found in the market. First Start is interesting. John Joe has a very good record with first time starters, and he has a runner in the 420, so that might be a race that I go open up and decide that I want to add this race to my races to look at in a bit more detail. And then Second Start, this Clive Cox one looks a bit of an outlier. Must have had I think wasn't Nando Parado one of these. So if you click on the little hat, the little up arrow here, it will show you that in this case Clive Cox is 117 qualifying runners, and then if you further click on the position column heading, you can see the winners, and I'm looking for the big winner here. There it is. Yeah, it was Nando Parado won the whatever race that was. Might have been the Coventry at Royal Ascot at 150 to 1, and that essentially accounts for all of the profit and some of the loss for Clive Cox's row on here. And you can tell that because the actual over expected number, even with this massive win figure, the actual over expected is below 1, which implies that something outlying had happened. So there's nothing of interest for me there. Now, one other thing actually, while we're here, on the First Start, if you change it to handicap, if you change race type from all to handicap, these are first time starters in handicaps today, and we can see that Nigel Twiston-Davies has a good record with these horses. So I might just add that 5:16 race at Perth to my races to have a look at. Okay, I'm just going to pop that back on all races. Trainer change. Donald McCain is interesting with a 24% strike rate. He's got one in the 1 o'clock at Ludlow. He's going to have to effect a strongly positive influence here, because this horse has had 3 runs. It's 50 to 1 today in a novice hurdle. And we can see that it's got features on my report angles for trainer change and also 60 plus days, but I would double check to see where it had come from and whether there was any particular hope, but to be honest, I'm going to let that one beat me, as it almost certainly will now I've said that. So I'm going to ignore that one. 60 plus days, again we've got a couple here that might be interesting on the AE. So Mark Prescott off a layoff. The feeling would be there that this one is going for a handicap next time. Maybe put that on the handicap there, see what we've got. Charlie and Mark, Pam Sly, brilliant. Pam Sly, brilliant trainer, definitely needs to be on your list. William Knight. So there's a few to go at there, and what you can do is basically you can work through whether it's the reports or the pace tabs or whichever way suits you, and whatever amount of time you've got to do it, you can work through that function or feature within GG's Gold, and you can add the races to your My Races list. Where's my races list gone? Yeah, there they are. So you can do that like that, and then go back to the races in question, which are again at the top of your drop down here. And that really is all I want to cover today, I think. There's no right or wrong way to do this. It's important to to find a way that works for you. But the key is that we're going from a day like today where we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. We've got 43 races today. Nobody can look at 43 races seriously. So what we're trying to do is reduce this to boil this down to the races where we've got ostensibly a good chance of coming out in front, and where the number of races gives us a sensible amount of time to look at each one, or maybe just a subset of the half dozen or so that you come up with. So I think this is where a lot of people go wrong. They try to do too much in not enough time, or they think, or they have a feeling of overwhelm because there are so many races, and they feel like they need to, cover the whole gamut. And the reality is that if we just get this bit right, if we just focus on a small subset of the races where we know a bit more than the bookmakers potentially, or at least more than the wider betting public, or we know that earlier, in other words, we can take an early price which shortens when people cotton on later on in the day, then those are the races that we should play. And they tend to be, for me, exposed form, often lower grade handicaps, where the horse with the best setup and the best fit against today's conditions wins, as opposed to the horse in a 3-year-old handicap that might be a stone ahead of its mark. I've got no way of knowing that. I don't have data to tell me that, and I'm not good enough at guessing it to get it right often enough. So I go looking for these races where, as I say, they've all done plenty, or there's an interesting report angle and the horse is a square price that justifies throwing a small dart at it. Either way, so whichever way suits you is the best way. And this is the way to add the races to your shortlist and to have them very conveniently accessible for you to look through. Okay, so that was race selection. This was Gold Nuggets, and this is Matt Bisogno saying thank you very much as always for listening and watching, and I'll speak to you soon. Bye for now.